All right, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling a story that is just absolutely epic. We're talking about a civilization that has risen, fallen, and come back again and again over thousands of years. We're digging into the incredible history of China and this powerful idea called the dynastic cycle that shaped it for, well, for a very long time.
I mean, think about that for a second. 5,000 years. How is that even possible? Empires come and go, right? The Romans, the Ottomans, they're gone. But China? It's still here. It's the longest continuous civilization on the entire planet. So what's the secret? Well, it's not just about big armies or powerful emperors. It's about an idea. A really, really powerful idea that basically shaped everything.
And here it is. This is the big secret. The mandate of heaven. Seriously, if you want to understand Chinese history, this is the key. Think of it like a divine seal of approval. Heaven gives a good, just ruler the right to rule, kind of like a green light. But, and this is the crucial part, if that ruler or their family becomes corrupt and awful, heaven takes that right away. And you know what that means? It means rebellion isn't just a crime, it's justified. It's the will of heaven. So you get this endless cycle that just becomes the engine of Chinese history. A new dynasty rises, things are great, then they get corrupt, they lose the mandate, and bam, they're overthrown, and a new dynasty takes its place.
So where do we even begin this story? Well, we start in total chaos. For hundreds of years, there wasn't one China. It was a total mess of different kingdoms, all constantly at war with each other. A real brutal free-for-all. But out of all that fire and bloodshed, one state, one incredibly ruthless state, was about to rise up and conquer every single one of them.
Just look at this timeline. The difference is just, whoa. You've got over 200 years of nonstop war, right? Total chaos. And then, in less than 10 years, one state, the Qin, led by this guy, Yingzheng, just rolls over everybody. It wasn't a slow grind. It was a lightning-fast, incredibly brutal conquest that brought all of that chaos to a screeching halt.
But here's the thing. Conquering all those kingdoms was only half the battle. Yingzheng, who now calls himself Qin Shi Huang, which means the first emperor, he knew that to hold it all together, he had to make everyone, well, Chinese. He had to unify the culture itself. So he forced everyone to use the exact same writing system, the same coins, the same weights and measures for everything. It was about creating a single, unified identity for the very first time.
700,000. Just let that number sink in. That's how many people scholars think it took to build the first emperor's tomb. The one with the famous terracotta army. He literally built an entire army out of clay to protect him in the afterlife. And he did it using this massive workforce, a workforce that was almost certainly forced into labor. It just shows you the incredible power, but also the incredible cruelty of his rule.
So yeah, the Qin dynasty was super powerful, but it was also super harsh. And because of that, it didn't last long at all. They pretty quickly lost that mandate of heaven, and the whole thing just crumbled. But, and this is a huge but, the unified empire they created, that foundation they laid, it paved the way for what came next. And what came next were golden ages. Long periods of peace and prosperity that led to some of the most important inventions the world has ever seen. The dynasty that followed, the Han, brought in this massive shift in how to rule. Okay, so the Qin followed this philosophy called legalism, which basically says people are naturally selfish and bad, so you have to rule them with an iron fist, through fear and super strict punishments. The Han, they went in the complete opposite direction. They adopted Confucianism, which argues that people are inherently good. I mean, what a game changer, right? Suddenly, the emperor's job wasn't to scare everyone into submission. It was to lead by example, to be virtuous, and to create a society that was fair and harmonious.
And with all this newfound stability, you get things like the legendary Silk Road. Now, we all think of it as, a trade route for silk and spices, connecting China to Rome, and it was. But it was so much more than that. It was basically the internet of the ancient world. Because while silk and tea and porcelain were heading west, brand new ideas were heading east. Things like Buddhism, which came from India, completely transformed Chinese culture, and it all traveled along these same routes.
And you know what else happens when you have centuries of peace and prosperity? You get incredible innovation. I'm talking about things that literally change the course of human history. Papermaking, the magnetic compass, printing, oh, and yeah, gunpowder. All of these were invented in China, often hundreds of years before they ever showed up in Europe. These weren't just clever gadgets, they were inventions that reshaped the entire planet.
So,
For about 1,000 years, this cycle just keeps on turning. Dynasties come, dynasties go. Some last for centuries, some just a few decades. But they were all Chinese dynasties. The system worked. And then, something different happened. From the endless grasslands to the north, a new power emerged. A force of nature, really. An outside army that wasn't just going to take over the dynasty, it was going to shatter the cycle itself.
Genghis Khan. And just read this quote for a moment. 40 million people. That's more than Hitler and Stalin killed combined. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around that number. The Mongol armies didn't just defeat their enemies, they wiped entire cities off the map. This wasn't just another change in dynasty. For the people living through it, this must have felt like the apocalypse.
So after the conquest, Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, starts a new dynasty, the Yuan dynasty. But how do you, a small group of Mongols, control a massive population like China's? Well, you create a strict social hierarchy, a caste system, and it's exactly what you'd expect. The Mongols put themselves right at the top, and way down at the very bottom, the southern Chinese, who were the last to fall. It was a system designed for one thing and one thing only, to keep the Mongols in charge and the Chinese people down.
Eventually, though, the Mongols were pushed out. Their rule was so brutal that, you guessed it, they lost the mandate of heaven. A native Chinese dynasty, the Ming, took back control, and it seemed like the cycle was back on track. The Ming were eventually replaced by another group of outsiders, the Manchus, who started China's very last dynasty, the Qing. But the threat the Qing would face, it wasn't going to come from warriors on horseback from the north. This time, the threat was coming from the sea. Okay, so fast forward to the 1800s. You've got Great Britain, and they are desperate for Chinese goods like tea and silk. But there's a huge trade imbalance. China's basically saying, we'll take your silver, thank you very much, but we don't really want your stuff. They controlled all the trade. So Britain needed something China would want to buy. And they found it. A horribly addictive drug, opium. And when China finally tried to put a stop to this massive drug trade, a war was pretty much guaranteed.
And the First Opium War was a complete shock to the system for China. Here they were, trying to stop drugs from flooding their country, and Britain responds with its full military might. And we're talking about modern, steam-powered gunboats against old-fashioned wooden ships. It wasn't even a fair fight. The Qing military was just crushed. The result was a fast, brutal, and deeply humiliating defeat.
The war ended with a treaty, the Treaty of Nanjing. But this was the first of many that would become known in China as the unequal treaties. And they were called that for a reason. China was forced to hand over Hong Kong to the British, open up its cities to foreign traders, and pay a fortune in reparations. This was the start of what many in China call the Century of Humiliation. For the first time in a long, long time, China was not in control of its own fate.
And in the end, this clash with the industrial West is what finally, permanently, broke the dynastic cycle. That whole system, the mandate of heaven, which had worked for thousands of years, it just had no answer for steamships and global capitalism. It just couldn't cope. The Qing dynasty was the last one, the end of the line. Which leaves us with this massive, hanging question. When a 2,000-year-old system is completely shattered, what on earth is going to rise up from the ashes?